The widow's tower was built for women no one wanted to hear scream. Its windows had been sealed for 100 years. Its doors were carved with old moon prayers. Its stones were said to remember every bride, servant, witch, and unwanted daughter locked inside before judgment. Some came out weeping. Some came out silent. Some never came out at all. Tonight, the court sent Elowen Mar there to lose her mind before dawn. By sunrise, they planned to make her confess. By midnight, every window in the tower would open to her name. Before the soldiers dragged her across the courtyard, Elowen was only the cursed girl with the wrong name. In the lower halls of Veyhold, people did not touch her shadow. Servants stepped aside when she carried water. Mothers pulled children close when the thin silver mark beneath her right eye caught the moonlight. It was shaped like half a letter no scribe could finish, and the priestesses claimed it meant the moon had started naming her, then stopped in disgust. Elowen had heard worse. Name broken, omen-tongued, tower-born. The last one hurt most, because no one knew why. When Elowen was 10, a dying widow in the lower infirmary seized her wrist and whispered, "Ale," before priestesses dragged the woman away and ordered Elowen to forget sounds that did not belong to servants. When she was 6, she had woken outside the widow's tower with frost on her lashes and blood on her sleeve, though there was no wound on her body. Her mother vanished that same night. By morning, the temple declared Elowen had been found where mad widows prayed to dead names, and no decent house should claim her. Saw none did. She grew up in the palace kitchens, useful enough to keep, cursed enough to blame. If bread soured, it was her breath. If a noble child fevered, it was her glance. If old doors opened without wind, servants whispered that Elowen had called something from the stones. Tonight, an old door had opened during the royal naming feast. That was all it took. The hall of names had been filled with nobles, wolf banners, and candlelight when the youngest lord of House Bran presented his newborn son before the Alpha King. A priestess dipped her finger in silver ink to write the child's name into the royal ledger. The ink turned black. Every candle bent toward Elowen. Then the newborn opened his eyes and cried a name no infant should know. Elowen. The key of first names at Celine's throat flashed once, then dulled, as if it had recognized a name it had failed to bury. The hall froze. Elowen had been standing near the back with a tray of wine cups, invisible until the baby's voice made her dangerous. The tray slipped from her hands. Red wine spread across the white stone like blood. High Namekeeper Celine Var rose first. She was old enough to have crowned 3 kings and beautiful enough to make age look intentional. Her robes were pearl white, her hair silver, her eyes cold as temple glass. Around her throat hung the key of first names, a crescent-shaped relic carved from bone and moonstone. "That girl has called through a child," Celine said. "A name. Curse." Elowen shook her head. "I did nothing." But denial sounded weak after a newborn had spoken her name. The nobles recoiled. The child's mother began sobbing. Guards seized Elowen before she could step back. They twisted her arms behind her, and the silver mark beneath her eye burned so sharply she nearly cried out. Then Alpha King Dorian Vale stood from his throne. The hall changed when he moved. Dorian was feared even before men saw his wolf. Tall, black-haired, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark royal coat, clasped with silver fang pins, he ruled with the stillness of someone who had learned early that anger wasted breath. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless under the candlelight. No one in Veyhold mistook calm for mercy when it came from him. No one in Veyhold knew that Dorian had not heard his wolf speak his name since the night his mother died. He looked at Elowen, not with pity, not with trust, with recognition he did not want. For one heartbeat, the mark beneath her eye stopped burning. Then Dorian's hand closed around the arm of his throne, and something behind him flickered. Not shadow exactly, a wolf shape, thin and restless, as if his own beast had heard a sound from very far away. Selene saw it too. Her fingers tightened around the key of first names. "The curse must be contained," she said quickly. She should spend the night in the widow's tower. If her mind survives, the tower will judge her name at dawn. A murmur of approval passed through the court. Elowyn's stomach turned cold. Everyone knew what that meant. The tower did not judge gently. It broke women open and let the court decide which pieces were guilty. Dorian's gaze did not leave her face. "Why did the child say your name?" "I do not know," Elowyn said. "Have you entered the Hall of Names before tonight?" "No." "Have you spoken to the child?" "No." "Then why did every candle turn toward you?" Her throat tightened. Fear wanted to make her bow. Pride held her still. "Perhaps," she said, voice shaking, "because candles know more than courts." The hall gasped. A guard struck her across the mouth. Dorian's eyes flashed. Not enough to save her, but enough for Elowyn to see he had not ordered the blow. Blood touched her lip. The silver mark beneath her eye pulsed once, and far beyond the hall, from the direction of the widow's tower, something answered. A window shutter slammed. Every noble turned toward the sound. Selene's expression hardened. "Take her." They dragged Elowyn through the courtyard, under a white moon and a watching court. No one followed closely, except the Alpha King. Dorian walked behind the guards at a distance, silent as winter. Elowyn felt his attention between her shoulder blades, like a blade held just above skin. At the tower door, Selene waited with the moonstone key. The widow's tower rose above them, narrow and black against the sky. Hundreds of sealed windows covered its walls, each one nailed shut with silver strips. No light lived behind them, no warmth. Selene touched the key to the door. It opened inward with a sound like a woman breathing after being buried too long. Elowyn tried not to tremble. Dorian stepped closer. "What happens if the tower finds her guilty?" Selene smiled without warmth. "Then by dawn she will have spoken the name of the thing inside her. And if she is innocent?" The priestess looked at Elowyn. "Then the tower will remain silent." Elowyn knew it was a lie. Old servants whispered, the tower was never silent. It only spoke in ways powerful men pretended not to hear. The guards shoved her inside. The door closed. Darkness swallowed her whole. For a while, there was only cold stone, her own breathing, and the distant sound of the court, leaving her to be broken. Elowyn pressed a hand to her bleeding lip and forced herself not to cry. Tears were for rooms that cared whether pain happened inside them. Then the tower whispered, not in words, in scratches. Behind the sealed windows, something began carving through the silver nails from the outside. Elowyn backed away. One window shuttered, then another, then another. At the base of the door, moonlight spilled through the crack. A shadow stood outside, tall, still. Dorian had not left. The first window burst open. Cold silver air rushed into the tower, carrying a whisper that sounded like hundreds of women speaking through one throat. Elowyn. The second window opened, then the third. Then every sealed window in the widow's tower flew outward at once. Moonlight flooded the chamber. Silver names ignited in the air around her, spinning like living stars. Outside the door, Dorian struck the lock with his fist. "Elowyn!" But the tower answered before she could. Not Elowyn. The name that rose from every window was older, brighter, and far more dangerous. Aloria. And outside the door, Dorian's wolf answered the name before the king did. Dorian's wolf answered before the king did. The sound came through the sealed tower door as a low, broken growl, not aimed at Elowyn, but at the lock between them. The old iron hinges trembled. Moonlight poured through every open window in the widow's tower, carrying hundreds of glowing names around her body like silver moths. Some were soft, some were sharp, some sounded like women weeping through stone. Ailoria. The name did not feel like a sound. It felt like something remembered inside her bones. Elowen stood in the center of the tower chamber, one hand over the mark beneath her eye, unable to breathe as the silver letters circled closer. They did not cut her skin. They did not burn. They brushed against her like fingers, checking whether she was real. Outside, Dorian struck the door again. Elowen, the tower, answered him instead. Not Elowen, Aeloria. The name rolled through the stones, down the outer walls, across the courtyard, and into the listening court below. Gasps broke the night. Horses reared. Wolves in the royal kennels began to howl, one after another, until the whole palace seemed to tremble under the weight of a name it had been forced to forget. High Namekeeper Celine's voice rose sharply from outside. "Do not open the door." Dorian's answer was colder than the night. "Move. She is no longer contained. She is locked in a tower built to break women, for good reason." Elowen stepped toward the door, but the silver names swarmed between her and the threshold. One name flared brighter than the rest. She reached toward it before she could stop herself. The moment her fingers touched the letters, the tower vanished. Not truly, but the chamber around her filled with memory. She saw the widow's tower as it had been long ago, not ruined and sealed, but bright with moonlit windows. Women stood inside, not mad, not condemned, but guarding walls covered in living names. They wore no crowns, only silver cords around their wrists and small marks beneath their eyes, each shaped like an unfinished letter. Name bound. The word entered Elowen, without being spoken. Then the memory darkened. Priestesses in pearl-white robes stormed the chamber. Names were scraped from walls with moonstone knives. Windows were nailed shut. Women were dragged out by their hair, their mouths covered so they could not speak the names they carried. At the center of the chaos stood a young woman with Elowen's eyes, clutching a child wrapped in gray cloth. Elowen's mother. Her heart lurched. The woman turned toward a hidden stair and pressed the child into another pair of arms. "Hide her name," she whispered. "Not her life. Her name." The vision shattered. Elowen stumbled back into the present, shaking. The tower door groaned as Dorian struck it again. This time, the lock cracked. Celine shouted something in the old moon tongue. At once, the key of first names at her throat flashed through the crack beneath the door, casting a pale blade of light across the floor. The silver names recoiled from it. Elowen felt pain stab beneath her eye. The mark burned. Outside, Dorian snarled. "What are you doing?" "Saving your throne," Celine said. The key turned in her hand without touching the lock. Inside the tower, every open window began to close. "Onabi'an." The silver names screamed. Elowen clapped her hands over her ears, but the sound was not outside her. It was inside her skull, inside her blood, inside the place where Aeloria had begun to wake. The tower walls darkened. Moonlight thinned. The living names spun faster, panicked, searching for somewhere to hide. One of them flew toward Elowen's chest. She gasped as it entered her. Then another, then dozens. Names struck her skin like sparks and sank beneath it. Servant names, widow names, queen names, names cut from ledgers, stolen from cradles, stripped from women before judgment. The tower was not attacking her. It was giving back what Celine had taken. Dorian broke the door open. The lock burst inward, and cold air rushed through the chamber. He stood in the threshold with moonlight behind him, pale eyes fixed on Elowen, one hand bleeding from the shattered iron. His wolf shadow filled the corridor behind him, larger than before, but still thin at the edges, as if part of it remained missing from its own body. He took one step inside. The names turned toward him. Dorian froze. For the first time since Elowen had seen him, fear crossed his face. Not fear of her, fear of what the names might say. A silver word drifted toward him, faint and trembling. Dorian. It flickered weakly, then split. Half the letters fell apart like ash. Dorian flinched as if struck. Elowen understood before he spoke. His name was broken, too. Selene appeared behind him, face pale with fury. "Your Majesty, leave the chamber." Dorian did not move. The wolf shadow behind him lowered its head, staring at Elowen with hollow, starving eyes. It tried to step forward, but an invisible chain pulled it back toward Dorian's feet. The chain was made of letters, false letters, names written over names, until truth could not breathe beneath them. Elowen whispered, "What did she do to you?" The question was barely sound, but the tower heard it. Every remaining window flew open again with such force that stone dust rained from the ceiling. Moonlight struck Dorian full in the chest. The broken name before him flared, and a second name appeared behind it, older, sharper, half-hidden under priestess script. Dorian reached for it. Selene raised the key. No. The key flashed. The hidden name vanished. Dorian staggered. His wolf shadow collapsed to one knee behind him, jaws open in silent agony. Elowen moved without thinking. She crossed the tower chamber and caught Dorian's arm before he fell. The moment her hand touched him, every name inside her body lit at once. Dorian's breath stopped. Elowen saw a boy in a nursery, no more than 7 years old, standing beside his dying mother's bed. Queen Mira held his face between her hands and whispered a name into his ear. Not Dorian. Something older, something his wolf answered with joy. Then Selena entered. The vision twisted. The boy screamed as the key of first names burned over his chest. His mother reached for him. Priestesses held her down. Selene took the true name from his mouth and replaced it with Dorian Vale, a name strong enough for a crown, but not true enough for his wolf. The vision snapped. Elowen released him and stumbled back. Dorian stared at Selene. The corridor behind him filled with guards and nobles drawn by the shattered tower door. They saw their Alpha King standing inside the widow's tower, blood on his hand, his wolf shadow kneeling at the cursed girl's feet. Selene saw the image forming. She moved faster than fear. "The girl has touched the king," she cried. "She has entered his name." A collective gasp broke through the corridor. Dorian turned sharply. "Enough." But Selene was already holding the key of first names high. "She is not merely cursed," she said. "She is name-bound. If she speaks what sleeps inside her, she can unmake every title in this kingdom." The nobles recoiled. Elowen felt the names beneath her skin stir. Eloria pressed against her throat. Selene smiled, but there was fear in it. "Chain her mouth." 2 priestesses stepped forward with a silver muzzle carved in moonscript. Dorian's wolf shadow rose. This time, it growled with sound. The priestesses froze. Dorian looked at Elowen, and the conflict in his face cut deeper than suspicion would have. He wanted answers. He feared them. He had seen enough to know Selene lied, but not enough to know whether Elowen's truth would save him or destroy everything his crown stood upon. Elowen lifted her chin. Her voice shook, but it carried. "If I can unmake titles, why are you afraid of my name and not your lies?" The tower went silent. Then the highest window opened by itself. Far above them, moonlight poured down like a blade and struck the floor between Elowen and Selene. Silver letters carved themselves across the stone. "Bring her to the Hall of Names. Selene Venstill." Dorian read the words. "So the tower has judged," he said. Selene's face hardened. "The tower has been corrupted." But the stones answered her. Every open window whispered Eloria again. This time, the whisper was not gentle. It was command. The Hall of Names had never been entered by someone the tower itself commanded. That was why the court walked behind Elowen in silence. No one touched her now. Not the guards. Not the priestesses holding the silver muzzle they had failed to lock over her mouth. Not the nobles who had watched her dragged away an hour earlier and now followed at a careful distance, pale beneath their velvet and wolf fur. They had wanted to see a cursed girl broken inside the widow's tower. Instead, they had seen the tower open every sealed window to a name older than judgment. Aialoria. The name still trembled beneath Elowyn's skin. It lived in her throat, like a bird trapped behind bone, beating its wings each time moonlight touched her face. She was afraid to speak it, afraid not to. Every step toward the Hall of Names made the silver mark beneath her eye burn hotter, as if the unfinished letter there had begun writing itself from the inside. Dorian walked beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. The court noticed. Celine noticed most of all. The High Namekeeper's face had returned to calm, but the key of first names at her throat had lost its moon-white glow. It hung dull against her robes, like a relic pretending not to fear what it had once buried. Dorian's wolf shadow followed close behind him, still thin around the edges, still chained by letters Elowyn could almost read if she looked too long. His face gave nothing away, yet she could feel the strain in him each time the shadow stumbled. The vision in the tower would not leave her. A little boy screaming as Celine burned one name over another, his dying mother reaching for him from a bed of white furs. "You saw it," Dorian said quietly. Elowyn did not look at him. "Yes." "My mother?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "What did she call me?" Elowyn's heart twisted. She had seen the name move from Queen Mara's lips, but the memory had blurred before sound could fully form. Or perhaps some part of her had refused to hear it, knowing that names were not harmless things in Veyrhold. "I do not know," she said. Dorian looked ahead. "Celine does." The Hall of Names opened before them, wide and cold beneath thousands of hanging candles. Its walls were covered in silver ledgers, name scrolls, birth plates, death plates, marriage cords, and royal oath tablets. Every child of noble blood had passed through this chamber to be named. Every marriage had been recorded here. Every exile had been renamed here. Every title in the kingdom breathed through these walls. At the far end stood the first ledger, bound in white wolfhide and locked beneath a glass altar. Celine moved quickly toward it. "The tower has demanded judgment, so judgment will be given." The girl will place her hand upon the first ledger. If Aialoria is a true name, the ledger will open. If it is a cursed name, the ledger will strip it from her before dawn. Elowyn heard what she did not say. If the ledger stripped the name, it might strip Elowyn with it. Dorian heard it too. "And if the ledger recognizes her?" Celine turned. "Then we will learn what she is." "No," Elowyn said. The single word surprised the court. Celine's brows lifted. Elowyn swallowed the fear in her throat. "You will not ask what I am like. I am a thing found under the tower stones." A murmur passed through the nobles. Dorian's gaze shifted to her, sharp and unreadable. Celine smiled faintly. "Then what should we ask?" Elowyn looked at the dull key at Celine's throat. "Ask why your key stopped shining when the tower spoke my name." The Hall of Names went colder. Celine's smile vanished. Before she could answer, the first ledger opened by itself. Pages flew beneath the glass altar, turning so fast their edges blurred into silver light. Candles bent toward Elowyn. Name scrolls trembled along the walls. The court backed away as a thin sound rose from the ledgers. Not a scream, not a whisper, but the rustle of thousands of erased names trying to breathe. The pages stopped. A blank page faced the hall. Then ink appeared. Not black, silver. Aialoria Merwin. Elowyn stared at the name. It was beautiful, terrifying. Heirs. Beneath it, another line formed. Last daughter of the name-bound house. Keeper of unaltered names. Blood witness to the stolen royal name. Celine struck the glass altar with the key. The page went black. Elowyn cried out as pain tore through the mark beneath her eye. Dorian caught her arm before she fell. His hand was warm and steady, but his wolf shadow snarled behind him, straining toward the altar. The court erupted into panic. Celine lifted the key high. "The ledger has been infected. The curse is spreading. Dorian's voice cut through the hall. Remove your hand from the altar. Selene did not. Instead, she turned the key. Every candle went out. In the darkness, the walls began speaking. Names poured from the ledgers in broken fragments. Women's names, children's names, soldiers' names, royal names. Some whispered in grief, some in rage, some barely more than breath. Then one voice rose above the rest, weak but unmistakable. Queen Mira, my son, was not born Dorian. The darkness shattered with moonlight. Dorian went still. Selene backed away from the altar, but the key at her throat had fused to the glass, held there by silver ink climbing up its edges like vines. The queen's voice continued. His first name was taken to bind his wolf to the throne. If he remembers it, the throne must answer to him. If he does not, he must answer to the throne. Every noble turned toward the Alpha King. Dorian's face had gone pale, but his eyes burned like cold stars. Eloin felt Eloria rise inside her, responding to the queen's voice, to the ledgers, to the wolf shadow trembling behind him. Selene whispered, "Do not listen to the dead." Dorian looked at her. "You have ruled through them for years." The first ledger turned another page. This time it showed a nursery beneath moonlight. Queen Mira bent over a sleeping boy and whispered his true name into his ear. Eloin leaned closer, desperate to hear. Selene ripped the key free. The vision split before the name could sound. Dorian's wolf shadow roared in agony. The glass altar cracked, and from beneath the first ledger, a second book rose. Its cover was made of black leather, stitched shut with silver hair. Selene went utterly still. Eloin looked at it and knew without knowing how that this was not a ledger of names. It was a ledger of names stolen. The stitches began to snap. The stitches snapped one by one. Each silver hair split with a sound so delicate it should have been harmless, yet every break made the hall of names tremble. The black ledger lifted from beneath the altar, as if dragged upward by invisible hands, its cover swollen with trapped breath. The candles did not relight. Instead, moonlight poured through the high windows and struck the book like judgment. Selene stepped in front of it. "No one touches that," she said. Her voice was calm, but the calm came too late. Everyone had heard the fear beneath it. Dorian's wolf shadow crouched behind him, teeth bared, its thin body stretched toward the ledger as if some missing part of itself had begun scratching from inside the pages. Dorian stood rigid, one hand still on Eloin's arm. She could feel the effort it took him not to tear the book open himself. Eloin looked at the black cover. Names pressed against it from within. Not written names. Living ones. They moved beneath the leather like hands beneath water. "What is it?" one noble whispered. Selene answered before anyone else could. "A containment ledger. Old temple practice. Dangerous names were sealed there when speaking them would endanger the kingdom." Eloin's throat burned. "A grave," she said. Selene's eyes cut to her. "A mercy. For whom?" The question landed hard enough to silence even the frightened nobles near the doors. The black ledger opened. No one touched it. The first page tore itself free and flew into the air. Silver ink formed across it, not in neat lines, but in frantic scratches, as if the name had fought even while being written. Mira Ashvale, Dorian's mother. The page burst into light. The hall of names vanished into memory. Queen Mira stood in the nursery again, younger than the dead voice had sounded, her dark hair loose around, a face made pale by fever. A small boy slept in a carved cradle beside her bed, one fist curled near his cheek. Dorian. Not yet cold, not yet silent, not yet carved into a king. Mira bent over him and whispered into his ear. This time Eloin heard it, not clearly, but enough. Dairion. The sleeping boy smiled. Behind him, a wolf pup made of shadow and moonlight lifted its head and wagged its tail. Dorian staggered in the present. Elowen caught his hand before she thought better of it. The memory sharpened. Selene entered the nursery with 3 priestesses behind her. "Your Majesty, the council has decided." Mira turned, already knowing. "No, the prince's name is too old. It answers before the throne speaks. His wolf will never be properly bound if he keeps it. He is not a chain for the throne. He is heir to one." Mira reached for the child. The priestesses caught her. The little boy woke and screamed as Selene drew the key of first names across his chest. Moonlight tore from his mouth in the shape of letters. His wolf pup howled and tried to bite the key, but another priestess pinned it with a chain made of silver script. Mira fought so hard one priestess fell. Selene leaned over the child and spoke with terrible gentleness. "Dorian Vale." The new name settled over the boy like frost. The wolf pup went silent. The vision broke. Dorian ripped his hand from Elowen's, not in anger at her, but because the pain had struck too deep for touch. His face had gone blank. That was worse than rage. Selene lifted her chin. "Your mother was dying. She did not understand what the kingdom required." Dorian turned toward her slowly. "You cut my name out of my mouth. We saved you from becoming a king ruled by instinct. You bound my wolf to a throne. I gave you control." His wolf shadow made a sound like a creature choking on old chains. Elowen stepped toward the black ledger. Selene snapped, "Do not." Elowen ignored her. The next page rose before she touched it. A woman's name appeared. Then another. Then another. Widows, servants, midwives, girls found near old towers, boys whose wolves answered wrong, noble daughters whose names did not match marriage contracts, hundreds of names sealed inside black leather because they made power inconvenient. The pages circled Elowen. Her silver mark burned beneath her eye. Aloria pressed against her throat again, stronger now, not asking to be spoken, but asking to be remembered. Dorian looked at the circling pages. "How many?" Selene said nothing. The ledger answered, "Too many for silence to remain holy." The words wrote themselves across the air. The court recoiled. Elowen felt something shift in the Hall of Names. The walls were no longer simply walls. They were listening. The ledgers, plates, scrolls, and candles leaned toward her, as if waiting for a command she did not know how to give. Then, one black page flew straight into her hands. It did not carry Dorian's name. It carried hers. Elowen Mar, kitchen servant, curse-marked girl, tower-born. The letters looked familiar. They looked like every record, every whisper, every accusation used to make her small. Then silver fire burned through them. Aloria Merwin appeared beneath. Last daughter of the name-bound house. Guardian of names no crown may alter. Blood witness to the first oath of the widow's tower. Elowen could not breathe. Selene moved faster than her age should allow. She seized the silver muzzle from one priestess and lunged for Elowen's mouth. Dorian caught Selene's wrist. The key at Selene's throat flashed. Dorian froze. His face went white, with pain as invisible script wrapped around his throat. The false name Dorian began glowing across his skin like a collar. Selene smiled through clenched teeth. "You see? He answers to the name I gave him." Elowen looked at him. The Alpha King, feared by every noble in Verhold, was choking on the name used to rule him. His wolf shadow clawed at the floor, unable to rise. Selene shoved the muzzle toward Elowen again. "Speak, Aloria, and I will make him forget even the name Dorian." Elowen went still. There was the trap. If she stayed silent, Selene kept the stolen names. If she spoke, Dorian might lose what little remained of himself. The court watched her with the old hunger, waiting for the cursed girl to become the reason a king fell. Dorian forced one word through the glowing script at his throat. "Speak." Elowen shook her head. His eyes locked on hers, pale and furious and full of pain. "Do not let her make your silence useful." Something inside Elowen broke. Not fear, the habit of obedience. She lifted the black page, with her true name written in silver. Around her, the stolen names began to orbit faster, whispering, crying, pleading. The widow's tower answered from across the courtyard, every open window glowing like an eye. Selene screamed. "Do not say it." Elowen spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the full weight of every name buried inside her. Aeloria, the Hall of Names, split open with moonlight. The silver muzzle shattered in Selene's hand. Dorian fell to one knee, and the false name around his throat cracked. The false name cracked around Dorian's throat. Not all at once. A thin silver break opened first beneath his jaw, then another across the glowing letters burned into his skin. The word Dorian trembled like ice under spring water. He knelt on one knee in the Hall of Names. One hand braced against the marble, his breath coming rough and shallow while his wolf shadow clawed toward him from the floor. Selene stared at Elowen as if she had watched a servant girl strike the moon. "You foolish child," she whispered. Elowen's true name still rang through the hall. Aeloria. The sound had not vanished after leaving her mouth. It moved through the ledgers, through the name scrolls, through the silver birthplates nailed along the walls. Every stolen name trapped in the black ledger answered with a whisper of its own. The Hall of Names had become a storm of memory. Dorian lifted his head. His pale eyes found hers. The glowing script around his throat tightened again, fighting to mend itself. Selene's magic was old and disciplined. It had held his wolf for decades. One true name spoken once could crack the lie, but not destroy it. Selene knew it. She stepped backward, regaining breath and authority at the same time. "Seize her before she speaks again." No one moved. The court had watched the silver muzzle shatter. They had seen the Alpha King fall under the weight of a name Selene claimed had saved him. Fear held them still. Selene turned on the priestesses. Now, 2 priestesses rushed toward Elowen with moon-script chains. Dorian tried to rise. The false name flared. Pain drove him back to one knee. Elowen moved before the chains reached her. She pressed the black page carrying her true name against her chest, over the place where her heart hammered beneath a servant's plain dress. "Aeloria," she said again. This time, the widow's tower answered. Across the courtyard, every open window blazed silver. The light shot through the night and into the Hall of Names like arrows. It struck the moon-script chains midair. The links opened, not breaking but unfolding into letters. Names spilled from them, women's names, old and soft, sharp and furious. All the names those chains had once silenced. The priestesses fell back with cries of terror. Elowen staggered. Speaking the name cost something. Her throat burned as if moonlight had edges. The mark beneath her eye opened wider, no longer half a letter now, but a silver curve extending toward her temple. Selene saw it and went pale. "She is ripening," one priestess whispered. Selene slapped her. "She is unraveling." But the hall had heard the fear. Dorian forced himself upright. His false name still glowed around his throat, cracked, but not gone. His wolf shadow rose with him, shaking violently. It was no longer silent. A low sound came from it, broken and desperate, like an animal recognizing the way home but unable to cross the final chain. Elowen looked at him. "What is your true name?" she asked. The whole court seemed to stop breathing. Dorian's mouth tightened. "I do not know." The answer was barely audible. For a man who ruled armies, the confession sounded like a wound. Elowen stepped toward him. Selene lifted the key of first names. "Stay away from him." The key flashed, and the floor between Elowen and Dorian filled with moon-script thorns. They rose from the marble in silver coils, each thorn shaped like a tiny letter. The air smelled of frost and old blood. Dorian's eyes sharpened. "Selene," she did not look at him. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I have protected you too long to let a tower-born curse undo you." Elowen stared at the thorns. A memory stirred inside her, the dying widow's hand around her wrist. A broken whisper. Ale. Priestesses dragging the woman away. Forget sounds that do not belong to servants. Elowen looked at Celine. She knew my name. Celine's silence answered too quickly. The widow in the infirmary. Elowen said. She tried to say Aloria. Dorian turned his head slowly. What widow? For the first time, Celine looked trapped. The black ledger opened another page. A name rose from it in silver fire. Mirith Merwin. The name struck Elowen so hard she nearly stepped back. Merwin. Her own hidden house. The page burned into vision. The hall of names fell away, replaced by the lower infirmary 10 years earlier. Elowen saw herself as a child with thin arms and frightened eyes, carrying a clay cup of broth between rows of dying women. At the far bed lay an old widow with white hair spread over the pillow like winter grass. Her wrists bore faded silver marks, shaped like unfinished letters. The woman caught young Elowen's hand. Aiel. Before she could finish, Celine entered with 2 priestesses. Not old Celine. Not frightened Celine. The same calm, beautiful high namekeeper who knew exactly what she had found. Take her, Celine ordered. Young Elowen cried out as the widow was dragged from the bed. The woman kept reaching for her, whispering through bloodless lips. Tell the tower she lives. The vision shifted. Celine stood over the widow in a sealed chamber beneath the temple. Where did the child come from? Myrith smiled through pain. From the name you failed to kill. Celine pressed the key to the widow's throat. The vision shattered before the scream ended. Elowen returned to the hall with tears on her face and no memory of starting to cry. Celine's mouth was a hard line. Dorian looked at her with terrible quiet. You killed a witness. I ended a dangerous line. You murdered an old woman. I buried a weapon. Elowen's tears cooled on her cheeks. For years she had thought her life was a chain of accidents. Her mother vanishing, the tower, the widow, the mark beneath her eye, the hatred following her from room to room. Now she saw the pattern. Celine had not been reacting to a curse. She had been hunting a name. Dorian's wolf shadow lunged toward Celine. The false name around his throat blazed, choking him back. Elowen stepped into the moonscript thorns. They cut her ankles immediately. Dorian's head snapped toward her. Do not. She kept walking. The thorns climbed around her legs, tearing the hem of her dress, drawing thin lines of blood. Each drop that fell onto the marble became a tiny silver letter. She did not know what she was doing, only that every step toward him made the stolen names inside her pulse harder. Celine's voice sharpened. You cannot free him without knowing his name. Elowen looked at Dorian. His face was pale with pain and fury, but he did not command her to stop again. He understood now that protection could become another prison if it took her choice away. Maybe I do not need to know it, Elowen said. Celine laughed. Names are the root of all binding. No, Elowen answered. Truth is. She reached Dorian and lifted her bleeding hand to the glowing false name at his throat. The moment her fingers touched the cracked letters, his wolf shadow surged through him. Elowen saw the nursery again. Queen Mira bent over the small boy, whispering the name into his ear. This time, the vision did not blur. This time, every stolen name inside Elowen held the memory still. Dairion. The true name struck her like a bell. Dorian gasped. The false name around his throat split wider. Celine screamed and drove the key of first names into the glass altar. The entire hall of names turned black. All the silver ledgers slammed shut. The widow's tower lights went out. Elowen stood with her hand on Dorian's throat in sudden darkness. Then, from somewhere beneath the floor, a voice whispered her true name back to her, Aloria Marvin, and something buried under the hall began climbing toward the surface. Something buried under the hall began climbing toward the surface. At first, it sounded like stone, remembering movement. A scrape beneath the black marble. A hollow knock under the glass altar. Then came a long, slow crack, splitting through the floor between the first ledger and the black book of stolen names. Nobles cried out and stumbled back. Priestesses clutched their robes. The hanging candles swung without wind, though none of them burned. Elowen stood in the darkness with her hands still pressed to Dorian's throat. Beneath her fingertips, the false name was broken but not gone. Dorian's skin burned cold under the silver letters. His wolf shadow had surged into him and stopped there, caught halfway between memory and body, as if the true name she had heard Darian had opened a door, but not yet given him permission to walk through it. His hand covered hers, not to pull it away, to keep it there. "Elowen," he said hoarsely. The name hurt this time, not because it was wrong, because it was incomplete. The tower had called her Aloria, the ledger had named her Merwin, the buried voice beneath the floor had spoken her as if she belonged to an old oath. But Dorian still held the name the world had left her, the name she had survived with. She looked at him in the dark. "I heard it," she whispered. His eyes sharpened. "My name?" She nodded. Every candle in the hall flared once with black light. Celine's voice cut through the darkness. "Then keep it behind your teeth if you want him alive." The floor split wider. Moonlight rose from below instead of above, pale and cold, illuminating a stairway that had not existed moments before. It spiraled down beneath the Hall of Names into a chamber where silver roots grew through black stone. Along those roots hung hundreds of small glass bells, each containing a trapped spark of light. Names. Elowen knew before anyone told her. Not written names. Not recorded names. Living names. The ones stolen before they could be spoken again. The key of first names remained buried in the glass altar where Celine had driven it, but its chain stretched from her throat to the crack in the floor, tightening like a leash. Celine's face had lost its serene beauty. She looked older now, not in years, but in fear. Dorian followed her gaze. "What is down there?" Celine said nothing. The black ledger answered. Its pages turned in the dark until one sheet floated free and hovered above the cracked floor. "The root vault," the words wrote themselves in silver. Then another line appeared. "Where first names are fed to keep false ones alive." The court recoiled. Dorian's hand tightened over Elowen's. His jaw was rigid, but she felt the tremor in him. His whole life had been shaped by a name that was not truly his. His wolf had been bound to a throne through that lie. Now the proof lay open beneath him, and still he did not rush forward. He waited, because Elowen stood at the edge of the vault too, and the thing below had called her first. That waiting steadied her. Celine recovered enough to speak. "The root vault is forbidden for a reason. First names are dangerous. They are wild things. If left unbound, they make girls think they are owed freedom, and kings think they are owed love." Elowen turned toward her. "You are afraid of names because they answer people before they answer you." The widow's tower answered from across the courtyard. A single silver window lit in the distance. Then another. Then all of them. The light poured through the hall windows and fell across the new stairway like a road. Dorian looked at Elowen. "Do not go down because the tower commands it." She almost smiled. "Almost. I am not." Celine's eyes narrowed. Elowen lifted her hand from Dorian's throat. The false name remained cracked, and he inhaled sharply, as if the air had changed shape inside him. His wolf shadow rose behind him, still chained, but watching her now with silver eyes that knew what she carried. "I am going because she buried my mother there," Elowen said. She did not know how she knew until she said it. Then the root vault answered. A woman's voice rose from below, faint as breath under ice. "Aeloria." Elowen stepped onto the first stair. Dorian moved with her. Celine shouted, "If he enters with that name broken, the vault will strip him empty." Dorian did not stop. Elowen did. She turned to him. "Is that true?" He looked past her into the rising moonlight, then back at her face. "Probably. Then stay." "No." The answer was immediate. A king's answer. A man's answer. A wolf's answer. Elowen shook her head. I will not become the reason you lose what is left of yourself. His expression changed at that. Some of the coldness fell away, revealing the wound beneath it. You are not the reason. You are the first person who has shown me there is something left to lose. For a moment, the hall, the court, Celine, the stolen names, everything faded beneath the danger of that confession. Then Celine tore the key from the altar. The moonlight stare flickered. The root vault began to close. Elowen ran. Dorian followed. They descended into the chamber beneath the hall as the stairs sealed above them, cutting off the court's shouts. Only Celine's voice slipped through before stone closed over it. Let the names eat them, then. The root vault opened around them like the inside of a sleeping tree. Silver roots twisted through black stone walls. Glass bells hung from every branch, each trembling with a trapped light. Some bells were bright, some nearly dark. Names whispered from within them, thousands of them, brushing against Elowen's skin as she passed. At the center of the chamber stood a woman encased in moonglass. Elowen stopped breathing. She knew the face, though memory had tried to erase it. Dark hair, pale skin, the same silver mark beneath one eye, but whole, where Elowen's was unfinished. Her mother. Dorian came to a halt beside her. The moonglass woman opened her eyes, and every bell in the root vault began to ring. Every bell in the root vault began to ring. Not loudly. That was what made it terrifying. The sound trembled through the silver roots, like thousands of trapped breaths, finally learning how to become voices. Glass bells swayed above Elowen's head, each one holding a light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Some chimed with grief, some with rage, some with names so old they had forgotten the mouths that once carried them. At the center of it all, the woman inside the moonglass opened her eyes. Elowen could not move. For years, she had carried her mother as absence. A missing face, a vanished hand, a story cut off at the tower door. She had imagined a body, a grave, a betrayal. She had imagined everything except this, her mother, standing alive inside glass beneath the Hall of Names, silver roots wrapped around her wrists, her whole mark glowing beneath one eye like a completed letter. The woman's lips parted. No sound came. The glass had stolen even that. Elowen stepped forward, and every bell rang harder. Dorian caught her wrist before she touched the moonglass. Wait! She turned on him with sudden fury. Do not tell me to wait. His hand released immediately. The speed of it shook her more than if he had argued. Dorian's face was pale in the root light. The false name still cracked around his throat, his wolf shadow moving uneasily behind him. I was not stopping you. I was warning you. Elowen looked back at the glass. Now she saw it. Names were carved into the moonglass from the inside. Hundreds of them, layered over one another, pressed so tightly they looked like frost. Some were nearly faded. Some still bled silver light. At the center, over her mother's heart, one name burned brightest. Leora Merwin. Elowen whispered it before she could stop herself. The moonglass shuddered. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Then a memory opened across the roots. Elowen saw the widow's tower on the night she was 6. Snow blew sideways through the courtyard. Leora Merwin ran barefoot over stone, carrying a small child wrapped in a gray cloak. Behind her, temple bells screamed. Celine followed with priestesses and guards, the key of first names shining in her hand. You cannot hide her forever, Celine called. Leora turned at the base of the tower, her face wild with fear and love. I do not need forever. I need one night. The child in her arms stirred. Young Elowen. No, Aeloria. Leora pressed 2 fingers beneath the child's eye, where the silver mark glowed whole and bright. Forgive me, she whispered. I have to break the name so it can survive. The vision twisted. Leora tore part of the silver mark from herself and pressed it into the child's skin. Elowen cried out in the memory. and in the vault at once. The mark split. The true name fractured. Eloria dimmed into Elowen. Then Leora placed the child outside the tower door and turned to face Selene. "Take mine," she said. "Leave hers unfinished." Selene smiled. A mother's bargain is always so easy to sharpen. The key flashed. The memory shattered. Elowen stumbled backward, hand over the mark beneath her eye. Dorian steadied her without gripping too hard. "She broke your name to hide you." Elowen stared at her mother in the glass. All these years, she had believed she was abandoned because she was cursed. But her mother had not left her outside the tower to be discarded. She had left her there to become incomplete enough to survive. Selene's voice drifted down from above, faint through sealed stone. "Touch the glass, Eloria, and every name inside it will rush toward you. Your mother was strong enough to hold them. Are you?" Elowen looked up. The root vault ceiling had sealed, but Selene's voice leaked through the silver roots, carried by the key of first names. Dorian's jaw hardened. "She wants you to break the vault." "No," Elowen said. She understood too much now. "She wants me to fear it." The bells quieted. Leora's eyes never left hers. Elowen stepped closer to the moonglass. This time Dorian did not stop her. His wolf shadow moved beside her instead, thin and aching, the cracked name around his throat glowing in warning. Elowen lifted one hand. The glass was cold. The moment her palm touched it, the trapped names surged. Not into her, toward her. They gathered behind the glass, pressing like a storm against a window. Servants, widows, children, old kings, erased daughters, nameless sons. Every stolen first name wanted release, but release without order would tear the vault apart and perhaps tear Elowen with it. Her mother's eyes pleaded, not for freedom, for care. Elowen closed her eyes. "A name is not a weapon," she whispered. The bells answered softly. "A name is not a chain." The roots brightened. "A name is a door." The moonglass cracked. Dorian inhaled sharply beside her. Selene's distant voice shouted in alarm, but the sound no longer mattered. The crack spread from Elowen's palm across the glass, not breaking it outward, but opening it like a seam. Leora Merowyn stepped through. She collapsed immediately. Elowen caught her. For one breath, mother and daughter held each other in the silver root light, while every stolen bell trembled above them. Leora's hand rose weakly to Elowen's face. Her fingers touched the unfinished mark beneath her eye. "My little Eloria," she whispered. The name entered Elowen cleanly this time. No pain, no fear, just recognition. Dorian turned away as if the tenderness hurt to witness, but Leora saw him. Her eyes widened. "Darian," she breathed. The false name around Dorian's throat split open. His wolf shadow roared. For one impossible heartbeat, Dorian looked almost young, stripped of crown, command, and the name that had held him for years. Then the root vault convulsed. The glass bells began cracking one by one. Leora gripped Elowen's arms. "Selene has opened the upper ledger. She is feeding the stolen names to the throne." Dorian's face went cold. "Why?" Leora looked at him with terrible grief. "To rename the kingdom before dawn." To rename the kingdom before dawn. For a moment, the root vault went so silent that even the cracked bells seemed to hold their breath. Elowen stood with her mother's weight in her arms, silver root light trembling over both their faces. The name Eloria still lived cleanly inside her now, no longer a broken wing beating against bone. It had settled into her like something that had always belonged there. But the relief lasted only a heartbeat before Leora's warning turned it cold. Above them, somewhere in the Hall of Names, Selene was opening the upper ledger. Dorian's false name still burned in fractured pieces around his throat. When Leora called him Darian, the crack had widened, but the binding had not fully broken. His wolf shadow stood behind him with its head lowered, half in rage, half in hunger, as if the true name had reached it but not yet freed it. "What happens if she succeeds?" he asked. Leora gripped Elwyn's sleeve. Her voice was weak, but the fear in it was sharp. Every title, every oath, every bloodline, every exile, every marriage bond written in Veyrmark can be altered before sunrise. Servants can be named traitors. Heirs can be named bastards. Queens can be named ghosts. Kings can be renamed obedient. Elowyn looked at Dorian. His eyes had gone pale and lethal. "She means to write the kingdom into her hand," he said. Leora nodded. "She has waited years for the root vault to open. She needed Eloria awake, and Darian cracked. She could not reach the living roots while both names slept. The words struck Elowyn harder than accusation. Celine had not merely feared her. She had needed her. Every humiliation, every whispered curse, every year spent in kitchens and corridors, every failed attempt to muzzle her inside the widow's tower had not been simple cruelty. It had been a long pressure placed on a buried name, until it finally split open at the right moment. Dorian saw the realization cross her face. "Elowyn," he said. This time, the name did not hurt, but it no longer held all of her. She looked at him. "She used me to open it. She used all of us." The answer should not have comforted her. It did, because he did not say it as a king claiming equal suffering. He said it as a man finally seeing the cage from inside it. Above them, the root vault ceiling shook. Black ink began dripping down the silver roots. Where it touched the glass bells, the names inside dimmed. Leora struggled to stand. Elowyn helped her upright, though her mother could barely remain on her feet. Years inside, moonglass had left her body fragile, but her eyes still carried the terrifying clarity of a woman who had given up everything except purpose. "We must reach the hall before she speaks the first renaming," Leora said. Dorian looked toward the sealed stair. "How?" The stairway that had brought them down was gone, swallowed by black stone. The only way upward now was through the roots themselves, twisting high into darkness. Elowyn felt the answer before she understood it. The names. They were doors. She turned toward the nearest silver root and pressed her palm against it. The bells around her hand trembled. Some names recoiled from her touch, afraid after years of being trapped. Others leaned closer, whispering fragments of lives stolen from ledgers. A kitchen girl named Mira, a widow named Thalen, a prince renamed before his first hunt, a midwife who remembered the wrong birth. Elowyn closed her eyes. "I will not command you," she whispered, "but if you want your names returned, open the way." At first, nothing happened. Then one bell rang. A second answered. Then hundreds. Silver roots bent downward, weaving themselves into a staircase of living names. Each step glowed faintly, formed from letters Elowyn could not read and somehow understood. Leora exhaled as if she had been waiting half her life to hear that sound. Dorian stared at the stair. His wolf shadow lifted its head. The names did not open for him. Not yet. Elowyn looked at the cracked letters around his throat. "You cannot climb while Celine's name is still choking yours." Dorian's mouth tightened. "Then, go." "No." The answer came too fast, too fiercely. His eyes sharpened. Elowyn stepped closer. "You followed me into the root vault, knowing it could strip you empty. Do not ask me to walk back into her hands while yours are still around your throat." Something moved in his face. Not softness, exactly. Something more dangerous because it had been earned. Trust. Leora's gaze shifted between them, and for one breath grief crossed her face. Perhaps she saw the shape of a bond beginning where no priestess had written one. Perhaps she feared it. Perhaps all mothers feared any fire that might take their daughter where protection could not follow. "The true name must be spoken by the one who carries the witness," Leora said. "But the king must accept it. If he refuses, the false name will tighten." Dorian looked at Elowyn. The chamber shook again. Black ink rained harder from above. Elowyn lifted her hand toward his throat, but stopped before touching him. "May I?" He looked almost startled by the question. Then he bowed his head. "Yes." She placed her fingertips against the broken script. The false name flared cold enough to numb her hand. Dorian did not move, but his breath caught. Elowyn felt the stolen name beneath the false one. Dairion, not simply a sound. A living thing. A boy smiling at his mother's whisper. A wolf pup lifting its head. A man who had spent years ruling with a name that answered the throne before it answered his soul. She spoke carefully. Dairion. Dorian closed his eyes. The false letters cracked wider. His wolf shadow took one step forward. Elowyn spoke again, stronger. Dairion Vale. The root vault answered with a deep silver hum. Dorian's hand closed over hers, not to stop her, but to anchor himself as the false name began peeling away from his skin like frost breaking from stone. Above them, Celine's voice thundered through the roots. By first ink, by stolen tongue, by crown and tower, I rename. The vault convulsed. Leora cried out. "Now!" Elowyn pressed both hands to Dorian's throat and spoke the name with everything inside her. Dairion. The false collar shattered. Dorian fell forward, catching himself against Elowyn's shoulders. His wolf shadow surged into him with a roar that shook every bell in the vault. For one blinding moment, moonlight burst from his chest and eyes, not as control, not as crown power, but as recognition. His wolf had remembered him. When he lifted his head, he was still Dorian to the court, still Alpha King, still the man shaped by years of cold rule. But beneath it, Darian was awake. The living name stare blazed silver. Dorian Darien looked at Elowyn as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time. "Eloria," he said. Her name and his voice opened every bell. The staircase rose. Together, with Leora between them, they climbed. Above, the Hall of Names split open as they emerged through the floor in a storm of silver roots and living letters. Celine stood at the glass altar, the upper ledger open before her, the key of first names buried in black ink. Around her, nobles knelt unwillingly, their names half-written across the floor in dark script. The first line of the renaming had already begun. The kingdom of Veyrhold shall answer to the namekeeper before crown, blood, or moon. Celine looked up. For the first time, she saw Dorian's throat bare of her false collar. For the first time, she saw Elowyn standing with her full name awake. And for the first time, fear made the high namekeeper look mortal. Elowyn stepped forward. The stolen names rose behind her like a storm. "No," she said. "It will answer to those you buried." The stolen names rose behind Eloria like a storm. They did not move like ink anymore. They moved like birds released from burning cages, silver and white, and sharp with memory. They poured from the root vault in spirals, filling the Hall of Names until the hanging candles swung wild, and every ledger along the walls burst open at once. Names flashed over the marble floor. Names clung to the wolf banners. Names circled the unwilling nobles kneeling beneath Celine's half-written renaming. The high namekeeper stood at the glass altar with the upper ledger open before her. For the first time, her hand shook. Aeloria saw it. So did Darian. He stood beside her now, his throat bare of the false silver collar, his wolf fully awake beneath his skin. He was still the Alpha King the court feared, but something had changed in the way he held himself. The throne no longer seemed to pull his spine straight. His wolf was not dragging behind him like a chained shadow. It stood within him, around him, behind him a great silver-dark beast with eyes like moonlit steel. Celine lifted the key of first names. Black ink dripped from its crescent edge. "You do not understand what you have freed," she said. "Names are not gentle. They remember debts. They remember blood. They remember every promise fools made before wiser hands corrected them." Eloria stepped forward. The mark beneath her eye burned whole now. A silver letter completed at last. "You did not correct them. You buried them. Celine's mouth tightened. I preserved order. The stolen names hissed. Behind Aloria, Leora Merwin leaned against one of the silver roots that had broken through the floor, weak from years in moonglass but still standing. Her eyes remained fixed on Celine, with the patience of a woman who had survived too long to be frightened by titles. You preserved fear, Leora said. Celine's gaze flicked to her. And fear kept this kingdom alive. Darian's voice was low. No, it kept it obedient. Celine turned the key in the upper ledger. The half-written renaming on the floor began to glow again. The kingdom of Verhold shall answer to the namekeeper before crown, blood, or moon. The words stretched outward, black roots crawling toward every noble, every priestess, every guard. Wherever the script touched skin, names appeared over throats and wrists, dull and dark, tightening like collars. Men gasped. Women cried out. A child began to sob behind his mother's skirts. Aloria felt the pull of it. Not on Eloin. On Ialoria, the renaming wanted her most, because her name could undo it. Celine saw her falter and smiled. You see, this is why names must be held by those strong enough to command them. Aloria took another step. No, she said. This is why no one should command them. The widow's tower answered from across the courtyard. Every open window blazed silver. The light struck the Hall of Names like dawn through a storm. The black renaming recoiled but did not break. Celine's key burned brighter, feeding on the upper ledger, on the trapped fear of the court, on the habit of obedience that had lived in Verhold longer than any person in the room. Darian moved toward the altar. Celine pointed the key at him. His true name flashed across his chest, Darian Vale, then dark script wrapped around it, trying to twist the letters into the old false shape. His wolf roared through him. He stumbled but did not fall. Aloria reached for him. He shook his head once, not refusing her, asking her not to spend herself on his pain while Celine still held the kingdom. The restraint hurt. It also strengthened her. Aloria turned to the storm of stolen names behind her. I cannot carry all of you. The names quieted. I will not become another vault. A silver name drifted toward her cheek, soft as breath. Myrith, the widow from the infirmary. Then another. Myra, Darian's mother. Then hundreds more circled her, waiting. Aloria understood. They did not need her to carry them. They needed her to open the place where they could return. She looked at the first ledger. Not the upper ledger Celine had corrupted. The first ledger beneath the cracked glass altar, the book that had opened for Aloria before Celine blackened the page. It still lay there, half buried under broken glass and dark ink, its white wolf-hide cover stained but not dead. Ialoriaran. Celine slashed the key through the air. Black script whipped toward her like a chain. Darian intercepted it with his body. The letters wrapped around his arm, biting into skin, but he held them there with a snarl. Go, he said. Aloria reached the altar. The glass cut her palms as she tore the first ledger free. Blood touched the white cover. The book opened. Celine screamed, Do not write in it. Aloria looked up. I am not writing. She placed both bleeding hands on the blank page. I am returning. The stolen names surged. They did not pour into her. They poured through her hands into the first ledger, not as lists, not as records, but as lives restored to themselves. The hall filled with voices. A mother calling a child, a soldier remembering his oath, a widow laughing before grief, a boy hearing his wolf answer, a servant girl whispering her own name for the first time without fear. The black renaming cracked across the floor. Selena staggered. The key of first names split down the center. No, she breathed. The first ledger turned page after page, faster than wind, accepting name after name until the walls themselves began to change. Old plates shattered and remade themselves. False titles burned away. Exile records unwrote their lies. Marriage cords tied by force loosened and fell. Servant rolls revealed daughters of hidden houses, sons of erased lines, children renamed to cover inconvenient births. The court watched its history collapse and return in the same breath. Then the first ledger stopped. One page remained blank. Aloria knew whose name it waited for. She looked at Celine. The High Namekeeper clutched the broken key against her chest, black ink running through her fingers like blood. Darian stepped beside Aloria, his arm bleeding from the script chain. "What is her first name?" Celine smiled then. A small, ruined smile. "You think I kept one?" The first ledger answered, the page filled with a single line. Celine Var, name self-buried. The hall went silent. Aloria looked at her, and for the first time, pity moved through the anger, not forgiveness. Celine had stolen mothers, children, kings, widows, entire bloodlines. But beneath the High Namekeeper stood a woman who had cut out her own first name, so no one could ever use it against her. Celine lifted her chin. "A name makes a person vulnerable." Aloria's voice softened. "No, it makes them real." The last silver root rose from the floor and wrapped around Celine's broken key. She tried to step back. Too late. The first ledger spoke her forgotten first name aloud. Serapha. Celine's face broke. The black ink fell from her hands. The renaming shattered completely. Across Veyrhold, every sealed window opened. Across Veyrhold, every sealed window opened, not only in the Widow's Tower, not only in the Hall of Names. Windows sealed in abandoned nurseries, prison chapels, old bridal rooms, servant corridors, moon temple cells, and forgotten upper chambers burst outward beneath the same silver light. The entire palace inhaled, as if it had been holding its breath for generations. Then the names came home. They moved through the kingdom like moonlit rain. Some entered ledgers, some returned to graves. Some touched sleeping children and made them stir with tears they did not understand. Some settled over old women who had forgotten the sound of their own first names after too many years of being called widow, servant, traitor, baron, cursed. Some flew toward the royal kennels, where wolves howled not in fear, but recognition. In the Hall of Names, Celine Var fell to her knees. No, Serapha. The forgotten name had stripped something from her that no chain could have taken. Her face no longer looked ageless. It looked exhausted, human, terrified. The broken key of first names lay at her feet, cracked in two, its moonstone surface gone dull as old bone. Aloria stood before the first ledger with blood on her palms and her full name burning beneath her eye. Darian stood beside her, breathing hard, his true wolf awake behind his eyes. The court stared at them, as if the world had been unmade and rebuilt before they could decide whether to kneel. Serapha lifted her head slowly. "You think this is freedom?" she whispered. "You have returned chaos." Aloria looked around the hall. Nobles clutched their throats where false names had loosened. Priestesses wept over ledgers that had rewritten themselves. Guards stared at one another as old loyalties and stolen oaths fell away. Servants near the doors touched their own mouths in disbelief, whispering names they had not dared speak. It was chaos, but it was alive. "No," Aloria said. "I returned choice." Serapha laughed once, broken and bitter. "Choice is how kingdoms bleed." Darian stepped forward. His voice filled the chamber, no longer forced through the cold shape of Dorian alone, but carrying the deeper sound of the wolf that had remembered him. "Then we will bleed honestly." The court went silent. He turned toward the nobles. "Every exile named under temple authority is suspended. Every marriage bond written by altered name will be reviewed. Every servant, widow, child, and prisoner whose name was sealed in the black ledger will be restored before moon law. No title in this kingdom will stand above the first name beneath it." A noble lord near the front recoiled. "Your Majesty, Half the court could lose land. Darian looked at him. Then half the court was holding what did not belong to it. The man lowered his gaze. Serapha pushed herself upright with trembling hands. And her? She pointed at Eloria. Will you place the name, bound girl beside you, and call it justice? Will you make the curse a queen by morning? Eloria felt the old instinct rise, the urge to shrink before a room, waiting to define her. Cursed girl. Tower-born. Namebreaker. Queen. Weapon. Savior. Different words. Same cage if she let them decide what she was before she did. Darian looked at her, but he did not answer for her. That mattered more than the whole court's silence. Eloria stepped away from the altar. No, she said. I will not be crowned because a tower opened. I will not be hidden because a priestess fears me. I will not be used to polish the conscience of a court that left me at a door and called it mercy. The widow's tower glowed through the high windows across the courtyard, every open frame shining like an eye. Eloria looked toward it. The tower will no longer be a prison, she said. It will keep the names that need protection, not the women men want forgotten. The first ledger turned a page by itself. Silver ink wrote the vow. Serapha's face twisted. You know nothing of keeping a kingdom. Leora stepped forward then, leaning on a silver root, but standing with the quiet strength of someone who had survived the moonglass and still kept her name. She knows what happens when a kingdom is kept by theft. Serapha looked at her, and for the first time, shame crossed her face, only for a moment. Then it was gone. Take her, Darian ordered. The royal guards hesitated, not because they wanted to protect Serapha, because for years, the High Namekeeper had been the one who told them who they were allowed to obey. Darian's wolf stepped forward in shadow and moonlight. The hesitation ended. The guards seized Serapha, but Eloria raised one hand. Do not seal her name. Everyone looked at her, even Serapha. Eloria's voice remained steady. Let her keep it. Let her hear it every day. Let every name she stole be read to her until she remembers why names should never belong to one hand. For the first time, Serapha had no answer. They led her away through a hall filled with restored names. When the doors closed behind her, the court did not cheer. There was too much grief for cheering. Too many lives to untangle. Too many dead to name properly. Too many living who would wake tomorrow and learn that the word they had answered to for years had been chosen by someone who wanted them smaller. But silence no longer felt like obedience. It felt like the first clean breath after smoke. Darian turned to Eloria. For a moment, the entire hall seemed to wait for the shape of whatever would pass between them. A king and the girl he had allowed to be dragged to the widow's tower. A man with his true name restored, and the woman whose name had opened the kingdom's sealed windows. A wolf and a name-bound heir standing amid the ruins of every lie that had made them useful. I cannot return the years they took from you, he said. Eloria met his eyes. No. He accepted the answer without flinching. I can return the tower. Your mother's house, the names in the root vault, and I can answer for the throne that let Selene become law. Serapha, Eloria said softly. Darian paused. Then he nodded. Serapha. It was a small correction. It was also the beginning of everything. Above them, the first ledger closed on its own. The black ledger of stolen names did not vanish. It remained on the altar, open to empty pages, no longer swollen with trapped breath. A warning, a record, a wound left visible, so no one could pretend it had not existed. Leora touched Eloria's shoulder. Eloria turned, and for the first time since childhood, stepped fully into her mother's arms. The embrace was fragile and fierce. Leora smelled of moonglass, cold stone, and the faint sweetness of old lavender from a memory Eloria did not know she still had. My little Eloria, Leora whispered. This time, the name did not feel like a revelation. It felt like home. Darien looked away, giving them the privacy of not being watched by a king. His wolf shadow settled behind him, no longer starving, no longer chained to a false throne. It lowered its head toward Eloria once, not as a subject bowing, but as a beast acknowledging the one who had returned its name. Dawn came slowly. By first light, the Hall of Names had changed. The cracked glass altar was removed. The first ledger was placed where every citizen could see it during judgment. The key of first names remained broken, sealed in a clear box not to be worshipped, but remembered. The silver muzzle was melted and poured into the hinges of the widow's tower windows, so they could never be nailed shut again. The court gathered in the courtyard beneath the tower. Eloria stood before the open door, where she had once been thrown inside to break. Her gray servant dress was torn. Blood marked her palms and ankles. The silver mark beneath her eye now curved complete and bright. Not a curse, not an unfinished letter, but a living sign of the name-bound line. Darien stood several steps away, crownless in the morning light. The nobles noticed. Of course they noticed, but he did not reach for the crown. Instead, he faced the kingdom and spoke with a voice that carried beyond the courtyard walls. Elowen Mar was the name this court used to bury her. Eloria Merwin is the name the tower returned. Both belong to the woman standing before you. No court will take either from her again. Eloria's throat tightened. He had understood. Elowen was not a lie to be discarded. She was the name that had survived. Kitchens, blows, fear, and years of being unwanted. Eloria was the name her mother had saved. Both were hers. Not Celine's, not the court's, not even his to sanctify. Eloria stepped forward. "The widow's tower will open at moonrise," she said. "Any person whose name was altered, sealed, stolen, or used against them may come. The tower will hear them. So will I." A murmur moved through the crowd. Fear, hope, disbelief. Then an old kitchen woman near the back began to cry. Not loudly, but enough. Eloria heard it and knew the work ahead would be heavier than any prophecy. There would be anger, claims, false memories, families torn open, nobles fighting to keep what stolen names had given them, priestesses begging to be forgiven because they had only followed the law, men calling truth a curse when it cost them comfort. But the windows were open now. That mattered. When the crowd began to disperse, Darien came to stand beside her, close enough that their shadows touched, far enough that she could breathe. "I wanted to break the door sooner," he said quietly. "I know, but wanting is not choosing." She looked at him. His face was open, in a way that still seemed unnatural, on a man raised to be a weapon for a throne. "No," she said. "It is not. I will choose better." Eloria looked up at the tower. At every window open to the pale gold morning. "Then choose it again tomorrow." Darien's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but something alive enough to become one someday. And the day after, the wolf inside him rumbled softly. Not a growl. A name remembered. Eloria reached toward the nearest open window. Moonlight still clung there, even under dawn. When her fingers touched the sill, hundreds of silver names stirred in the air, then settled, gentle as snow. For the first time, the widow's tower did not whisper like a prison. It breathed like a house waiting to be filled. Eloria stood in its doorway, with her mother behind her, the Alpha King beside her, and a kingdom waking uneasily into truth. And when the wind moved through every open window, it did not scream. It spoke her name.